Hello, I'm Bob Roden, Susan's husband. Windermere's history could fill a book, so I'll just touch on some highlights. In 1910, Swansea was growing, and the minister at Howard Park Methodist called for a church to be opened in this area. By 1912, people started meeting in a tent church on the hills to the south. Something more permanent was soon needed, and that same year, Howard Park paid for land at Windermere and Mayfield. A temporary building was placed there, and it became Windermere Avenue Methodist Church. Within 2 years, that temporary building was destroyed in a vicious windstorm, just hours after a Sunday evening service. Tenders were called, and a wooden building costing $1,413 was constructed and opened for church services just 6 weeks after that storm. In 1925, most Methodist and Congregationalist churches and about 2/3 of the Presbyterian churches merged to form the United Church of Canada. So Windermere Methodist became Windermere United. Our neighbors at Morningside chose to stay Presbyterian, but some of their members who favored church union moved to Windermere to join the new United Church. Meanwhile, the brick building that now houses our sanctuary was under construction. It opened in 1926, the same year that Swansea became a village. The design was unique. I've heard there was some doubt whether the area could support another church. So our building was designed for easy conversion to a public building or a library if it were no longer used for worship. It seems we have now come almost full circle. By the 1940s and 50s, things were really hopping at Windermere. As Susan mentioned, everyone came to church then. We ran 3 services each Sunday, and the church was usually packed. Programs included a large Sunday school, Cubs, Scouts, CGIT, Brownies, Guides, a young people's group, Bible study groups, lawn bowling, and 4 women's groups that later merged to form the United Church Women. By the 1950s, the building was bursting at the seams. A fundraising initiative was launched, and the Christian education wing was opened in 1957 with space for offices, Sunday school rooms, choir robing rooms, a parlor, and so on. It replaced the old 1914 wooden church building, which had been moved in the 1920s to make way for a sanctuary. The actual cost exceeded the original $100,000 estimate by roughly $20,000, but the congregation rallied and all expenses were covered. I was introduced to Windermere in 1984 when I met and soon married my lovely wife, Susan. It was still a very active congregation with many activities, and I quickly got involved. Reverend Dan Bailey introduced me to the finance committee, and I helped by computerizing the financial records. Before that, Gary Hinchcliffe was using huge paper spreadsheets, and it amazed me that he could always balance the books. There were talent shows, and that got me started reciting poetry, such as The Cremation of Sam McGee by Robert Service. In the 1980s and 90s, there was still lots going on, but at a somewhat reduced level. The demographics of the area were changing. People had more diversions on Sundays. Membership numbers were slowly dropping. Worship services had been reduced from 3 to 1. Our building was aging and wasn't wheelchair accessible. And covering our costs was becoming an ongoing challenge. The money issue was addressed from 2 sides. 1, how to attract more members and increase income, and 2, how to reduce costs. We actively recruited rent-paying tenants. An elevator was considered. We said farewell to our paid soloists and assistant minister. We also arranged for the 101st Scout Group to move next door to St. Olive's to free up space for paying tenants. There was talk about remodeling the sanctuary to create a professional theater. We even explored the idea of reconfiguring the whole building, shrinking the sanctuary, and adding a seniors residence on the site. In 2005, we sold the manse and moved to part-time ministry before going back to full-time 6 years later. More recently, Even with our aging congregation, Windermere has hosted various outreach initiatives, provided sanctuary for a family facing deportation, and sponsored a Syrian refugee family, all while doing our best to remain optimistic about the future. Then COVID restrictions hit us, and the writing on the wall became clear. Coincidentally, some of the same conditions that have led to a decline in worship-related activities have also created a demand for more community outreach programs, and that's where we find ourselves today. As I mentioned, this was just a brief overview. Others have written more detailed histories, and I invite you to check those out if you're interested. Thank you.
My name is Susan Cooper Roden. My parents and I moved to Swansea when I was 3, and we became members of Windermere United Church. Reverend O'Brien was our minister. Before I was born, my father had been in the Windermere United Church band, which he enjoyed. I went to Sunday school here and later went to Brownies and Guides. I was in the junior and senior choirs and later taught different levels of Sunday school for 5 years. When I was growing up, everyone in Swansea walked to church. There wasn't an empty seat in the church, especially at Christmas and Easter. The ushers had to put extra chairs in the side aisles for everyone who came in later. The church was filled to the back row of the balcony. When I was quite young, my friends and I liked to sit in the balcony so that we could get a better view. I also ushered and helped at the church bazaars, lunches, dinners, and concerts. There were skating get-togethers at Rennie Park in the winter and church picnics in the summer, which were fun. I made a lot of good friends at Windermere. Bob and I were married by Reverend Doug Brown in 1985. Bob became the chairman of the finance committee and also the treasurer. We showed our travel pictures at meetings of the United Church Women to raise money for the church. Windermere United Church was a great place to grow up, and so was the village of Swansea. Thank you very much.